All right. Welcome to the full step-by-step guide of how to fill out a perfect NCAA March Madness bracket. Before I go by each of my picks round by round and figure out who I think is going to cut down the nets in New Orleans at the Final Four for the national championship on April 4th, I wanted to just mention a few seating disagreements that I had with the committee. I feel like the most popular disagreement that most people have mentioned is Tennessee getting a 3 seed over Duke, or Tennessee getting a 3 seed when they should have been a 2 seed instead of Duke. Um, I, I I can't say that I'm surprised with the committee's decision to do that. Tennessee has a better resume. Duke didn't win their conference tournament in a weaker conference than the SEC with Tennessee. I mean, I agree with everyone's disagreement, but I can't say that I'm by any means shocked at the decision that the committee made. Other than that, I didn't really have much of an issue uh with anything. Michigan at an 11 seed over Indiana, I think was a little rich for me, but uh, Michigan played a tough non-conference schedule. They had wins over. They destroyed San Diego State. They lost to Seton Hall by 2. They challenged themselves, and that makes sense. So overall, I didn't really have too many disagreements. I didn't like that they matched up two mid-majors with Murray State and San Francisco, two teams that I really like. I think you should give them a chance at one of the Power Six conference schools, and but it should be a terrific basketball game. So, but I didn't really have any issues with any seeding outside of that. I think it should be a terrific tournament with plenty of upset potential, and I think it's one of the most open fields that we've seen in a while. There's a lot of teams with high potential. So I'll just get right into my picks. We'll start in the West region with Gonzaga and Georgia State. I don't see any 16 seeds knocking off a 1 seed this year. There's no UMBC. If there was to be one, it would be the winner of Wright State Bryant, who I think is going to be Bryant with the leading scorer in the country, Peter Kiss. Uh, Must watch TV. I think that's going to be the 16 seeds playing in the first four are typically some of the more boring games, but that Wright State Bryant game is going to be must-watch TV. I'll get to that later. But let's actually start with the first four. Excuse me. We'll start with that game. Wright State Bryant. I think that Wright State has a strong offense. Bryant's offense, I think, is stronger. I really like Bryant's head coach. They have, like I said, the leading scorer in the country, Peter Kiss. They have Charles Pride, who averages 18 a game. I think they're going to get out of the first four in Dayton and beat Wright State to take on Arizona. And the other 16 matchup, it's Texas Southern and Texas A&M Corpus Christi. I'd be lying if I knew too much information about either one of these teams. Texas Southern plays in the MEAC, Corpus Christi in the Southland Conference. I think the Southland, since Stephen F. Austin and Sam Houston State left for the MAC, that is one of the weakest conferences in the NCAA. And I believe Abilene Christian left. So they really don't have anybody good in that conference anymore. So for that reason, I'm taking Texas Southern, who plays in a better conference in my eyes, and they have more experience in the tournament. In the last four teams in the field, starting with Wyoming and Indiana. A lot of people are going to take Indiana in that game. And while it would not shock me if the Hoosiers won, I believe that Wyoming has more offensive scoring potential. I don't think Indiana is going to be able to keep up with them. Wyoming has one of the best duos in the country. Hunter Maldonado and Graham Ike are one of the best 1-2 punches offensively. I think both of them average close to 20 points a game. Maldonado's more versatile on the wing. as more of a facilitator and playmaker. Ike is more down low, big man. But I got Wyoming over Indiana for the right to take on St. Mary's. And then in the other game, Rutgers and Notre Dame, I have Rutgers taking down Notre Dame. Everyone knows they've been playing great basketball in the second half of the season. I think their experience in the tournament with Ron Harper Jr., Paul Mulcahy, Geo Baker, a group that was in the tournament last year, they've been playing together for a while. I think that is going to pay off for them in the first four. And I think I believe every season there has been a team that has at least advanced to the round of 32 out of Dayton, out of the first four. And if I had to pick one, it would be Rutgers. I will get into that when we get to that matchup, but I really like that Rutgers team. I think they have the pieces to match up with a lot of teams in the country. Big Cliff, their big guy down low, Amaru, or however you say his name. I think he's a great big man and can help them match up with anyone in the country, really. All right, so past the first four, now we're going to get into the round of 64. So starting with the top left, like I said, I think Gonzaga is going to be able to get past Georgia State. Georgia State was a mid-seed in the Sun Belt Conference. They're not anything special. No offense to them, Gonzaga. It will advance. Boise State, Memphis, a very interesting 8-9 matchup. I believe that Memphis is one of a handful of lower seeds to be favored in their first round matchup. Boise State's, they're both two teams that like to slow it down, play some defense. Memphis is obviously one of the more talked about teams in the country with Penny Hardaway at their head coach, the whole Amani Bates experiment this year. I think they've been playing some of the best basketball in the country over the last month of the season. And I think that Memphis is going to be able to outscore Boise State and win that game. As for Uconn, New Mexico State, a very interesting 5-12. Everyone loves to pick the 5-12 upsets. Uconn has been peaking at the right time. They've been playing very well during the second half of the season. One of the more athletic teams that you will see in the country. But New Mexico State is a team that has been a terrific college basketball program as of late. Winners of the WAC conference. They're led by former high major transfer at a few different stops, Timmy Allen, the brother of Teddy Allen, who is on Texas. But so his brother Timmy is on New Mexico State, and he's a 20-point per game scorer. And I think for that reason, and because UConn's UConn, I just think, has a lot of holes. They're not great at one thing. They're not a great defensive team. They're not a great offensive team. Their strength, I think, is athleticism. I love Danny Hurley, and I think he's a terrific head coach, but I got the Aggies advancing over UConn. Arkansas and Vermont, two teams that I am a huge fan of. If Vermont played against any other 5 or 4 seed in the field, I might be taking them over Arkansas, but I think Arkansas is the strongest 4 seed in the field. I said Memphis is playing some of the best basketball in the country over the last month. I think Arkansas is playing the best. JD Note, Jalen Williams, the must bus. I think Arkansas knocks off Vermont, and Vermont does not have the length and athleticism to keep up with the Razorbacks. As for the next matchup, like I said, I have Rutgers advancing, so I have Rutgers taking on Alabama. Alabama's a team I've been up and down on all year. They have the talent, they have the coaching, they have everything to be a great basketball team. But I think this year they're just lacking the true leader. They don't have a guy on their team that can bring everyone together, and when things get tough, lean on that guy. They just have no discipline. I love Nate Oates, and I think he's a great basketball coach. But this year, it just seems like the group's just not meshing together. And I think Rutgers' experience and time spent playing together, it will pay off, and they'll be able to win another game and knock off Alabama. The next game, Texas Tech over Montana State. Montana State doesn't do much special. I think Texas Tech's defense and length and depth, one of the stronger teams in the country in all those areas. I think it will overwhelm the Bobcats from the Big Sky, and Texas Tech will advance. Michigan State versus Davidson, a very interesting matchup. I think a lot of people are going to be off Michigan State because they've struggled at some times this year. They've looked really bad at times, but I think Tom Izzo will be motivated against one of his former players, Foster Loyer, who's the leading scorer for Davidson, and I think that he will be able to advance over the Wildcats of the Atlantic 10. Davidson does have a great offense, but I don't think they can defend well enough to hold off the Spartans. Duke over Cal State Fullerton. Cal State Fullerton does not do really anything special. Coach K is not losing to them in the first round. Duke advances. I'm going to be going by region, who I think is going to come out. So we'll finish this region first. Gonzaga versus Memphis. Anyone who knows me, I'm a diehard Gonzaga fan. I love Minnesota sports and all things Minnesota sports, but my one team outside of Minnesota is Gonzaga. If the Zags were playing the Gophers, I would root for the Gophers, but Gonzaga against anyone else in the country, I am rooting for. With that being said, this is a very interesting matchup. I do believe Memphis will be able to keep this game close. They have the talent, they have the length to match up with Gonzaga. Drew Timme struggled against physical big men, especially against St. Mary's earlier in the year when they did lose to them. I think he's going to struggle against Jalen Duren. I think that Duren will be matched up on Timme because Timme plays down low, and I think Duren is going to be able to eat his lunch personally. But that's my biggest worry in this matchup. But I think Memphis's lack of guard play and scoring and shooting will not be enough to get past Gonzaga, one of the best offensive teams in the country. So I have Gonzaga advancing. New Mexico State versus Arkansas. I love J.D. Notae, Jalen Williams, underrated, one of the most underrated players in the country. They're a big guy. Chris Lykes coming off the bench. Arkansas's got too much firepower, too much experience. Eric Musselman, one of my favorite coaches in the country. I got Arkansas advancing. And then I have Rutgers, who I believe is going to beat Notre Dame, playing against Texas Tech. Texas Tech is such an interesting team. I've been back and forth on them all year. I think that they're underrated. And then I think that they can't score. They've looked pretty good in the Big 12 tournament. I think their lack of a true ball dominant guard is going to catch up to them in March, something that I think successful teams need to have in March Madness. And I think Rutgers' experience and a group that's been together compared to a Texas Tech team that has kind of been thrown together with a lot of transfers, I think is going to pay off against Mark Adams, a coach that has not done it at Texas Tech. And I think Rutgers and Steve Peichel and Ron Harper Jr. are going to advance to the Sweet 16. Duke versus Michigan State, kind of a perfect matchup for the NCAA for ratings. Coach K, last hurrah, blah, blah, blah. Duke starts 5 first-round picks, 5. They have the best roster in the country. Anyone who disagrees is wrong. They have the most talent in the country. I believe that Coach K, I have a lot of opinions on Coach K, but we're just getting to my picks here. So I think Duke advances. They just got too much firepower. Michigan State's not going to be able to score, not going to be able to keep up, and Duke advances. Gonzaga versus Arkansas. I think this is a game that Gonzaga matched up much better with than Memphis. Both teams are kind of similarly built. Jalen Williams will probably be on Timme again, and I think Chet will be able to exploit the lack of a second big man for the Razorbacks. And I think Gonzaga will be motivated to right their wrong of losing in the championship last season, and I believe that they will advance past the Razorbacks. And then Duke versus Rutgers. I think Rutgers' magical Cinderella run will end in the Sweet 16. I think Duke has too much firepower, too much talent. They're not going out before the Sweet 16 in Coach K's last year. It's just not going to happen. And then I got Gonzaga versus Duke, a rematch from the early season game in Vegas where Duke knocked off Gonzaga. It was kind of the beginning of the Paulo Banchero hype train. Everyone thought he was a lock for the #1 overall pick, a lock for the player of the year. After that, kind of died down since then. I think Gonzaga is going to be motivated to get revenge. And I think Coach K's career ends against the Zags, and I got Gonzaga as my first Final Four team. All right, in the East region. Just kidding. We're going to go to the South region. We're going to stay on the top half of the bracket. So I have Arizona versus Bryant. And like I said, I don't think any 16 or 15 is going to win this year, but I believe the strongest 15, including the 15 seed. So I think the strongest 15 or 16 seed will be Bryant. So if there is one, it's going to be Bryant over Arizona. Arizona might be a little on a little high after winning the Pac-12. Kirk Kriisa still might not play it. I believe that he will, based on everything that I've seen and heard. Their starting point guard, but I think Arizona still advances. In my eyes, the most complete team in college basketball, the most aesthetically pleasing team in college basketball, the most fun to watch team in college basketball. They will have no problem getting past Bryant. Seton Hall versus TCU. Another interesting 8-9 matchup. Seton Hall's starting point guard, Bryce Aiken, had a concussion midway through the year, and he's kind of been out since then. Backup point guard, not backup, but their young guard, Jared Rhoden, has kind of stepped up and been their lead guy and been terrific in the down the stretch of the Big East season. But I think their lack of depth is going to catch up to them. And TCU, a team that has really been playing well, knocking off Texas Tech and Kansas in the last few weeks, and Texas in the Big 12 tournament. I think TCU advances. All right, Houston versus UAB, another 5-12. If there are a handful of upsets that I think are going to happen in this first round specifically, and this is one of them. I'm not a believer in Houston. Their best win is a neutral site win over Memphis and a home win against SMU, who's a 1 seed in the NIT. They beat, I believe, one team in the tournament field, and that is Memphis. And they lost to them at home and lost to them at Memphis, but they beat them in their conference championship. I think Houston stinks. And UAB has one of the most exciting players in the country, Jelly Walker, point guard. He is going to be one of the stars of March, and he is going to lead the Blazers over the Cougars in a 12-5. Illinois versus Chattanooga, two teams, again, I really like. Chattanooga, if they were matched up against Uconn, any of these 4s or 5 seeds, I would be picking them to win. I really like Chattanooga. Malachi Smith, David Jean-Baptiste, Kansas transfer Silvio De Sosa. They are a very talented team, but I think Illinois is going to be motivated and hungry after an early round exit last March against Loyola Chicago. I think Kofi Coburn will overwhelm Chattanooga and Illinois will advance. Colorado State versus Michigan, another 6-11 matchup. Colorado State's an interesting team. David Roddy, Minnesota native, conference player of the year in the Mountain West. Very interesting player. He kind of is almost a version of Charles Barkley. He's like 6'8", but he plays center. Big dude, rebounds the heck out of the ball, high motor. But I think Michigan is going to be on a revenge tour a little bit, and they are going to want to prove to people, Juwan Howard is going to want to prove to people that this team belonged and that they belonged in March Madness, in the NCAA tournament. And I think they're going to knock off Nico Medved in Colorado State in their head coach's first appearance in the NCAA tournament. Tennessee and Longwood. I think Longwood stinks, and I think Tennessee is very good. The champions of the Big South, the Lancers, I don't think have enough firepower to knock off the Volunteers. 7-10 matchup. Ohio State, Loyola Chicago. Loyola Chicago is, I believe, I didn't mention, I think Michigan is another one of those first round matchups where the lower seed team is favored to win. And I think Michigan's favored by like 3. But Loyola Chicago is another one. I believe they're favored by 1.5. So I think everyone's going to be on Loyola Chicago, but I think it's for good reason. Ohio State has very talented team with E.J. Liddell and Malachi Branham, but they don't have the guard play, I believe, to handle Loyola Chicago's defense and the pressure they're going to put on them. And I think Sister Jean and the Ramblers advance again in March Madness. Villanova, Delaware. I think Delaware stinks. They were like the 4 seed in the CAA tournament. They have Jameer Nelson Jr. Fun fact, kind of a cool tidbit. But I think Villanova advances. I think they are one of the more complete teams in the country, and I believe this is overall is the toughest region. I did not mention that, but between Villanova, Tennessee, Illinois, and Arizona, it is just a loaded region, in my opinion. But I think Villanova advances past the Blue Hens and goes to the round of 32. Arizona versus TCU. I don't think TCU has the length and the size. They just simply don't have the guys to keep up with Arizona. I think Arizona with Kerr Kriisa, Ben Mathurin, Dalen Terry, Subelis, and Coloco might have the best starting 5 in college basketball. I love the brand of basketball they play. They run up and down. They play the game of basketball the way I think it should be played. They use their athleticism, and I think they're just gonna overwhelm TCU, a team that has shown up at times this year, but they're not gonna be able to score with Arizona. UAB versus Illinois. I think Jelly Walker's March Madness run ends in the round of 32. I think Illinois' depth at the guard position with Trent Frazier, Alfonso Plummer, Andre Curbelo, I think it overwhelms UAB. And then they obviously got big Kofi Coburn down low, and I think they advance to the Sweet 16. All right, Michigan versus Tennessee. This is a game that I went back and forth on a lot. I could see Michigan giving Tennessee a tough game. Tennessee is a perimeter-oriented team. Michigan obviously has Hunter Dickinson down low. I think that Tennessee's guard play is that much more significant over Michigan's overall team. And I think Rick Barnes makes it to the Sweet 16 and has some success in March, a time where he has struggled in recent years. Loyola Chicago versus Villanova. This is another matchup where I really like to pick the 7-10s over the 2s and the 8-9s over the 1s. I do have some in the bottom half of the bracket, but Loyola Chicago, if they're playing really any other 2 seed except for Duke and Villanova, I would consider them winning. But I think Loyola Chicago's head coach, Drew Valentine, in his first March Madness and his first NCAA tournament is going to be that his lack of experience is going to catch up against a coach that might have had the most success in March over the past decade, Jay Wright. He just knows how to win. I believe he's the best active coach in college basketball, and I think he gets past the Ramblers and Sister Jean. All right, Arizona versus Illinois, an earlier matchup from earlier in the year. Arizona played Illinois in the non-conference, and I believe it was in Champaign, and Arizona knocked them off in a close one, if I do recall. I can see what the score was. Yes, Arizona won by 4. I think this would be a terrific basketball game. These are 2 of my favorite teams in the country. I think 2 of the most talented teams in the country. But I think Arizona's speed and cohesiveness is going to pay off in the end. I think They have a better head coach. Brad Underwood makes a few decisions in game that I am confused with sometimes. I think he's a great basketball coach, but he hasn't shown it up in March Madness yet with the Fighting Illini. And I think first-year head coach Tommy Lloyd has shown zero flaws. Illinois' flaw is they sometimes get too crazy. Curbelo might be doing behind the back, between the legs passes off the backboard, and it might cost them. So if I close my eyes and envision this game, I see a late turnover by Curbelo costing the Fighting Illini, and Arizona advances to the Elite Eight. Villanova Tennessee, another early season rematch where Villanova handed Tennessee an 18-point loss. I believe that was on a neutral floor in I don't remember what, I believe it was a neutral floor game. I don't remember what tournament it was, but another early season rematch. And in this one, I think these are two very, very, very similar teams. They're very guard oriented. Both of them kind of have two main guards, Villanova with Colin Gillespie and Justin Moore. And then Tennessee with Kennedy Chandler and Santiago Vescovi. And then they all have some role players. Villanova with Jermaine Samuels, and Tennessee with Zakai Ziegler, Josiah Jordan James. I think Jay Wright's experience in winning in March pays off here, and they knock off Tennessee again. It sets up an Arizona-Villanova Elite Eight matchup, and I think the Wildcats from Tucson, not from Philadelphia, the Arizona Wildcats, their size, their length, is going to be too much for Villanova to handle. A team without a true big guy. Christian Coloco and Soup Ellis, I think, are going to overwhelm Villanova. And I got Arizona in the Final Four. All right. On to the East region. Baylor versus Norfolk State, the champions of the MEAC conference. I believe I said Texas Southern was from the MEAC. They're in the SWAC. But Baylor's beating Norfolk State. Norfolk State, a former Cinderella story when they knocked off Norfolk State and Kyle O'Quinn over Missouri. I just remembered that. But Baylor advances. They have a lot of question marks where I will get to shortly, but I think they'll have no trouble against Norfolk State. North Carolina Marquette. North Carolina has been playing great over the second half of the season. Hubert Davis's first year as a head coach, not any head, or not just at North Carolina, but anywhere. Head coach at Division I basketball. They're a very talented team. They've been playing very well, but I have Marquette winning this game. I think Justin Lewis and Daryl Morcell, led by Shaka Smart, a guy who has had success in March, not in a while, not with Texas, but with VCU. I think he's in his school where he knows where to win. He knows how to win. And I think Marquette's wing play is going to overwhelm Caleb Love and RJ Davis. And I think the Golden Eagles are advancing. St. Mary's versus Wyoming. I have Wyoming winning that game. And I have St. Mary's beating Wyoming. St. Mary's is one of the best defensive teams in the country. I think the West Coast Conference was terrific this year. And St. Mary's they kind of mowed through it. They knocked off Gonzaga once. They beat San Francisco twice. I believe they also beat BYU. They beat Notre Dame, a tournament team, only lost Wisconsin by 6. I think their defense is going to overwhelm Wyoming, and I have the Gales advance into the next round. UCLA versus Akron. I think Akron's one of the more overseeded teams in the field. I think they're good. They're just not good enough to score with UCLA. And if I was a betting man, UCLA is favored by 15.5 in that game. Hypothetically, if I were a betting man, I think they win by more than that. One of the bigger spreads in a 4-13 matchup. The only double-digit one. Wow, they're favored by 15.5. Arkansas 5.5, Illinois 7.5, and Providence 1.5. That's interesting. That kind of tells you why. Like I said, I think Akron's very overseeded. I think UCLA is talented enough to destroy anyone they play. Texas versus Virginia Tech, another one of those games where the lower seed is favored. Virginia Tech, after their run in the ACC tournament, is favored to knock off the Longhorns of Austin, Texas. And I think they do so. I think that Storm Murphy, Keve Aluma, and the Hokies from Virginia Tech knock off Texas, a team that I think struggles to score too much, and I think it's going to hurt them once again, and I think they're going to lose in the first round. I think they might be another very overseeded team in my eyes. They don't really – so they beat Tennessee at home, I believe. They beat Kansas once, lost twice to Texas Tech, lost twice to Baylor, lost to Seton Hall. Yeah, like I just don't think they're anything special. Virginia Tech's playing probably the hottest team in the country right now, so I think they advance. Purdue versus Yale. Everyone likes rooting for the Ivy League teams in March Madness. I feel like they're always good. They're always competitive. I think this Yale team isn't as talented as some in the past, and I think Purdue advances. I think their size and their length is going to overwhelm them. Sometimes what I like to look at with upsets sometimes, and when these mid-major teams are playing a high major team, sometimes you have to look at when Purdue comes off the bus. It's kind of like who comes off the bus test. Like, who's the bigger team? Like, Purdue's going to roll out Travion Williams and Zach Edey, and I think Yale will be overwhelmed. It's a team that they haven't played anyone like that this year. Purdue's the type of team that, like, once you get on the court with them, I think it's going to scare them. Like, they lost by 22 to Auburn, so I guess that they have a similar team to Purdue, but 27 by St. Mary's. Purdue's going to win that game. Murray State versus San Francisco. I'm going to grab my computer chart. And I don't know how to pause this, and I don't really care, to be honest, because I can do whatever I want. All right, now we are cooking. All right, Murray State versus San Francisco. One of those matchups I previewed earlier, one of the more underrated first-round matchups in the tournament. Another one where the lower seed is favored. San Francisco is favored. Like I said, I'm betting on the West Coast Conference this year. San Francisco challenged themselves in the non-conference. Wins over Davidson and UAB. They lost to Loyola Chicago, beat BYU twice. They lost to St. Mary's twice and Gonzaga 3 times. But I think that's because Gonzaga and St. Mary's are very good teams. And I think San Francisco is going to be able to beat a Murray State team with a lot of talent. Sometimes, like, Murray State hasn't lost since they played, I think it was UNCG in like December. Sometimes when you go into the tournament, you haven't lost since you need to face some adversity. And that's why I'm such a fan of Arizona. They faced adversity in the Pac-12 tournament with Kerr Kriisa going down, their starting point guard going down. And they were able to overcome that. Dalen Terry did a terrific job filling in for Kerr Kriisa at the point guard spot, and they didn't even miss a beat. So for that reason, I love Arizona. And for that reason, I don't like Murray State because they haven't faced any adversity. I think these are two very comparable teams. I think San Francisco is going to be motivated. Their first time in the tournament since like the 90s. A very guard-heavy team. I love teams that are led by their guards, and I think they knock off Murray State. Kentucky versus St. Peter's. I think St. Peter's is terrible. They are not good. I believe they were the 2 seed in the MAAC. Kentucky rolls. 0 issue. You probably revisit this when one of these are upsets. But as for the rest of the field, the East region, like I said earlier, I love taking the 8-9s over the 1s and the 7-10s over the 2s. In your bracket pool, everyone loves the first round upsets. They're like, oh, I'm going to take a 12 seed. I'll take an 11 seed here, 10 seed there. But you don't get that many points in your like when they're scoring them because it's a first round matchup. And they don't happen that often. I'm picking a lot of them just because I can. And I think, but they don't happen that often, to be honest. I believe, like what does it say here? At least one 12 seed has defeated a 5 seed in 31 of the 36 tournaments. So that one happens often. And I think that this says 6 seeds are just 21 and 23 against 11 seeds. Wow, so the 11 seeds almost win more matchups. But so that's the one that I like, and that's why I have 3 of them winning. I don't have this one winning, but we'll get to that later. But I'm kind of going away from my point here. The 9 seeds over the 1 seeds and the 7-10s over the 2s is where you can separate yourself in your bracket pool because a lot of people aren't going to do those. A lot of the people just pencil in the 1s and the 2s, at least to the Sweet 16. That's what happens often. And let's see the seed fact on here. Well, they win 91% of the time, but that's a 9 seed. That doesn't say what 8 seeds do. I would be curious what that is. I could check. Let's see. $58 of 73 meetings. So that's only 79% of the time. So it happens more than you think. And I think Baylor is very vulnerable. I think Marquette, their length and depth on the wing is going to be able to match up with a Baylor team that does not have much depth down low. And I think Marquette matches up well. And I think Justin Lewis and Daryl Morcell are going to be able to knock off a Baylor team kind of limping into the tournament. I think Baylor's a little overrated, to be honest. Everyone talks about how many quad 1 wins they have. They have a win over Kansas. Villanova, that Villanova game, I don't know what happened to Villanova. That was one of the worst Villanova games I've ever seen. So you can throw that one out the window. I don't know what happened. But so they have 1 win over Kansas, Texas twice, who I think stinks. They lost to Alabama. They beat Michigan State, who's Michigan State, and Oklahoma twice. Like, they don't really have a win there that I'm like, whoa. Marquette, on the other hand, they beat Villanova at Villanova. They swept them. They beat them at home. They beat Illinois early in the year. They lost to Uconn twice and Creighton 3 times, which is a bit concerning. But they also beat Providence once. I think Marquette is going to win this game, and they are going to advance to the Sweet 16. St. Mary's versus UCLA. This is a game that is going to be a dogfight, a very low-scoring game. 2 teams that like to play slow. And I have St. Mary's edging out UCLA. I think that Randy Bennett, this is one of the best teams that he has had with the St. Mary's Gales. And I think Alex Dukas and Thomas Kuzi are going to be able to get past UCLA, one of the more talented teams in the country that has kind of struggled. And I think they're counting their press clippings a little bit. I think they are, after their Final Four run last year, and they beat Villanova early in the year, everyone's like, oh, UCLA's back. UCLA's back. Since then, they have not been back. They had 1 home win over Arizona. But they got swept by Oregon. They just have a lot of holes. They did beat Marquette, Washington State twice, but they lost to USC once. They absolutely got obliterated by Gonzaga. I think they just aren't playing real together as a unit, and I think St. Mary's is, and I think that is why I'm taking the Gales. Virginia Tech against Purdue. I have Purdue in this game. I don't think Virginia Tech has the length and size to match up with the Boilermakers. I think Purdue has a lot of holes, and I don't really like them that much. They're super talented, and they have all the pieces to make a run, but it's just, they're one of those teams, eye test, you're just watching them, and you're like, something's not right with this team. And I think Virginia Tech has a chance to win this game, but they need to make a lot of shots. They need to shoot the ball very, very well. Their margin for error is small. Purdue's margin for error is big in this game. So for that reason, I'm taking Purdue. San Francisco versus Kentucky. If the Dons were playing, if they were playing Duke, I might take the Dons. If they were playing any 2 seed but Villanova, I would probably take them. But they are playing, in my eyes, the best 2 seed with Kentucky. And I think San Francisco is going to keep this game very, very close. Very close. And I would not shock me if they win this game at all. I would be very not shocked. I think San Francisco is the most underrated team in the country. I've said a few of these teams are underrated, but I think San Francisco is the most underrated team in the country. They have great guard play, a young head coach. I love the style of basketball they play. Todd Golden, I believe, is their head coach's name. But this Kentucky team is not going out early. They have all the pieces. Ty Washington, Xavier Wheeler, 2 great guards. They have Kellen Grady, a great shooter at the 3, can also play some 2. Oscar Tshiebwe down low. They have depth off the bench. Jacob Toppin, Davion Mintz. I got the Wildcats advancing. Marquette versus St. Mary's, a 9 versus a 5. Like I said, this is where my late upset's coming. I had a 1-2 in the Elite 8 up here. I'm not a chalk guy. I'm not going to lay chalk on the whole board. I'm not that person. Marquette versus St. Mary's, I got Marquette. I think St. Mary's, their lack of scoring is going to catch up with them at some point. Against UCLA, a team that likes to slow it down, I think they're able to play at UCLA's pace, and it kind of favors them. But against Marquette, I think Marquette's going to be able to speed it up. Their size and athleticism is going to overwhelm St. Mary's, and I got Shaka Smart making another Elite 8 run in his first year at Marquette. Kentucky versus Purdue. This is where I think Purdue's run ends. This game is a terrific matchup. 2 of the more talented teams in the country, but I think Purdue's lack of a true point guard and Jaden Ivey is a great player. I think he's going to be a great NBA player. He's super athletic, so fun to watch. His potential is super high, but he's not like a facilitator, and I don't think you can play him at the true point guard spot, and Purdue's kind of been forced into doing that. Kentucky has 2 true point guards with Xavier Wheeler and Ty Washington, who could both handle the ball and facilitate. Both have gotten 10 assists in a game at different points this year. I got the Wildcats advancing. Kentucky versus Marquette. I think Marquette's lack of a big man is going to catch up to him in this game, and I think Oscar Tshiebwe overwhelms Marquette's inexperienced front court, and I got Kentucky in the Final Four. All right, so we are 3 regions down. We are flying by this. All right, in the Midwest, in my eyes, the weakest region in the field. All of these teams are incredibly vulnerable. This region is going to be chaos, in my opinion. With that being said, it's probably going to be all chalk because that's how March Madness works. And this region is probably going to be all the upsets, the one that I didn't pick any. But whatever. Kansas versus Texas Southern, who I think is going to win the first 4 game. Kansas is going to roll. Texas Southern does not have the guys to keep up with the Jayhawks. San Diego State versus Creighton. 2 teams that I really like. San Diego State might play the best defense in the entire country. Brian Dutcher is a terrific head coach. He's built a great program in San Diego with the Aztecs. And San Diego State is led by Matt Bradley, a terrific guard, but he is about their only offensive player. That is their weakness. They don't have much to work with on offense. And if he's not playing well, they don't have much else to go to. Nathan Mensah down low, terrific big man. And I really like Creighton. They look terrific in the Big East tournament. Alex O'Connell, Ryan Kalkbrenner, Greg McDermott, I think, is a great head coach. I could see either team winning this game. But I think San Diego State's defense and better primary ball handler. I think it's going to catch up to Creighton. They had Ryan Nemhard, who was the Big East freshman of the year, break his wrist or fracture his wrist late in the season. I think that's going to catch up to him at some point, and I think it's here against San Diego State. Iowa versus Richmond. Iowa is a very hot team. It's a very popular Final Four pick. When I was watching them on Sunday in the Big Ten tournament, I had a lot of questions. I thought they looked soft. I thought they had a lot of weaknesses, and they looked very beatable in my eyes. I think a lot of these Big Ten teams look beatable. They're all very talented. But Iowa is going to have the best player on the floor against Richmond. They're going to have Keegan Murray. I think Keegan Murray is the second best player in college basketball behind Oscar Tshiebwe. And I think this Iowa team is going to be motivated after their early exit last year. Keegan Murray was on the team. He was a freshman, so he knows how it feels to be in the tournament, and he knows how to play with expectations, or at least how the team handles the expectations. They obviously have Jordan Bohannon, both of the McCaffrey brothers. I like Richmond, and I would not be shocked if Richmond kept this game close. Iowa is favored by 10. That is the biggest spread out of any of the 12-5 matchups. And if I were hypothetically a betting man, I think Richmond keeps it close, but I think Keegan Murray in the end, Iowa's veteran guard play against a team that is also very veteran, but I think it pays off in the end, and they're not going out in the first round. They're not going to let it happen. No, sir. Providence, South Dakota State. I laughed when this line came out because a lot of people all year have been like, oh, Providence is a fraud. They just get lucky, blah, blah, blah. And it's true. They are. They're a fraud. They do get very lucky, and it's shown in the Big East tournament. They're only 1.5-point favorites against a Summit League team. They're favored by 1.5 against South Dakota State. And I think it's for good reason. I think this is going to be the most popular first round upset picked. And sometimes you gotta roll with the public. The public is right sometimes. There's a reason why everyone's picking South Dakota State. It's because Providence is a fraud. I love Ed Cooley. I love Providence. They're such a fun team to root for. But South Dakota State is 30-4. They haven't lost since December. I kind of contradict myself sometimes, and how I said that I think Murray State's going to lose because they haven't faced adversity. But I think South Dakota State's going to win this game. Baylor Shireman, terrific mid-major player. The Jackrabbits are going to lean on him, and I think they will advance to the round of 32. LSU versus Iowa State. Very interesting game. Two programs that are in very interesting spots. LSU just fired Will Wade, their head coach, because he was paying players left and right. We all know about that. But they are a very talented team. Tari Eason, Darius Days, Xavier Pinson, one of the better trios in college basketball, in my opinion, when they were at their best this year. And they have an interim head coach who does have coaching experience at Howard and Hampton, I believe. And I think that they're going to be able to outscore Iowa State. Both these teams play very similar styles. They like to play slow, defense heavy, but I think LSU's length and experience is going to be too much for the Cyclones, and they're going to advance. Wisconsin versus Colgate. There's always one game all year in March Madness, the one upset that nobody sees coming. Last year was Oral Roberts. There's been teams like Georgia State knocked out Baylor a few years ago, Ron Hunter Jr. I don't know why I thought of that one, but there's always one that nobody sees coming. They're like, didn't see that one coming. Everyone sees South Dakota State coming. Everyone sees all these 11-6 coming. They see UAB coming. They see New Mexico State coming. But I see Colgate coming. I am taking the Colgate Raiders over Wisconsin. I think Colgate was in the field last year. They're one of the more interesting teams in the country this year. I believe they started 3-10. I could be wrong, but I believe they started. No, I think it was 4-10, and they have won That's, 19 of their last 20 games. They obviously play in the Patriot League, one of the worst conferences in college basketball. But they have like 4 guys who average over 10 points a game. They're a terrific offensive team. Something that Wisconsin teams historically struggle at. This year, they're a little better offensively. Johnny Davis, Brad Davison, they got the guards, they got Tyler Wall. Last 2 games, they lost them both. They lost to Nebraska and Michigan State, 2 teams that stink. Both those teams aren't good. I know I said Michigan State's beating Davidson, but that's because I think Tom Izzo's a very good head coach. They stink. They don't have any good players. Wisconsin does have a good player. They have Johnny Davis, and I think he has carried them as far as they can go. And I think he looks a little tired. He's got a bum ankle, and I think with a Johnny Davis not at 100%, Wisconsin is incredibly vulnerable. And I think that Colgate wins this game. If you look at all the 3 versus 14 seeds, if you go up top, Texas Tech is a 16.5-point favorite. That is a massive favorite. Vegas thinks they're going to destroy Montana State. Purdue, 17.5. That is a massive favorite. Vegas thinks they're going to destroy Yale. Tennessee, 17. They have a lot of confidence that the Volunteers are going to roll through the Lancers. But Wisconsin, they are an 8-point favorite. That means that Vegas has less confidence in Wisconsin beating Colgate than they do Iowa beating Richmond. They have they have the same confidence in Wisconsin beating Colgate as they do Houston beating UAB. So basically what I'm saying, Wisconsin's on upset alert, and the Raiders from Colgate are going to knock them off. And I'm calling it here. You heard it here first. Right there. You heard it. Next matchup, USC versus Miami. I have the Trojans taking down the Hurricanes. Miami has terrific guard play. Isaiah Wong, Cameron McGusty, Jim Larinaga, coach who can win in March. But I think their lack of a big guy is going to catch up to him, and Isaiah Mobley will take advantage. Auburn going to roll through Jacksonville State. It's stupid Jacksonville State's in the field. They didn't even win their conference tournament. Bellarmine should be in the field. Put Bellarmine in the field. NCAA, you're done. Top of the bracket, Kansas, San Diego State. For all the reasons why I said I like San Diego State. They slow down the game. They got terrific defense. Something that I think Kansas isn't that good at this year. They're not that good defensively. Something that they've been good at in the past, but they struggle with at times this year. Look at that. San Diego State allows 57.7 points per game. I think if San Diego State is able to play this game at their pace, slow it down, very few possessions, they're going to win this game. And I think they're going to knock off Kansas. Iowa versus South Dakota State. This is going to be an incredibly high-scoring game. Might have a total of 160 points, 165. 2 of the best offensive teams in the country. They both average mid-80s. I think that Iowa's just going to outscore them. They play a little bit better defense than South Dakota State. This Iowa team plays better defense than last year, and I think that's what increases their ceiling a bit. Keegan Murray, South Dakota State's going to have no answer for him. And I got the Hawkeyes advancing to the Sweet 16. LSU versus Colgate. I think LSU's going to go on a run with this interim head coach. They have the talent. I think Colgate's going to get overwhelmed by their size. Unlike against Wisconsin, a team that, like I said, that walking off the bus, they're not going to be scared by Wisconsin. Colgate's going to walk on the court, and it's going to look like they're playing Holy Cross. They got the same guys on the team, and it's going to look like they're playing Bucknell. They're better basketball players, but they look like the same team. It's basically what I'm saying. LSU, on the other hand, they're going to walk on the court and be like, damn, LSU's got a bunch of football players on the team. For that reason, I'm taking LSU. USC versus Auburn. I think Auburn has a ton of red flags. Their guards are sporadic at best. They are chaotic. They do whatever they want. They don't get the ball to Jabari Smith. I think they have zero discipline. Bruce Pearl just lets them run around, and I think that's going to catch up to them at some point. They haven't corrected it once all year. It's been an issue, and they just keep going with it. And I think Auburn might have the best front court in the country, right up there with Gonzaga. Walker Kessler and Jabari Smith compared to Chet and Drew Timme, 1A and 1B. But USC is able to match up with that. They have Isaiah Mobley. He's not as good as Evan Mobley last year, but he's still 6'10", 7 foot, and he can negate that. He's not going to be scared going up against Walker Kessler. And I think USC's guard play with Boogie Ellis, Drew Peterson, I think they're more of a disciplined team, and I think they're going to knock off Auburn. And like I said, this is the chaos region. No ones, no twos, no threes or fours in the Sweet 16. San Diego State versus Iowa. Most simple reasoning behind this. San Diego State's lack of scoring is going to catch up to them at some point, and I think it's here. I think Iowa just outscores them. San Diego State doesn't have the guys to keep up with the Hawkeyes' high-powered offense. LSU versus USC. I think LSU's lack of a head coach is going to catch up with them at this point. At USC, I think still pretty underrated. They didn't underseeded too. They didn't really have many big wins. They beat UCLA once, lost to Arizona twice. They beat San Diego State by 15, split against Oregon. But a lot of these guys were in the Elite Eight last year. They know how to do it. And I think they're going to knock off LSU. I think Andy Enfield's one of the more underrated coaches in the country, and I think they're going back-to-back Elite Eights. Iowa versus USC. They make it all this far. They're motivated. They're to correct the wrong of last year, getting bounced by Oregon. And I think USC does not have the firepower to keep up with Keegan Murray, Jordan Bohannon, Connor McCaffrey, Patrick McCaffrey. I think Iowa is going to the Final Four. I hate to say it. If they had any other draw, if they were in any other region, if they were playing Chattanooga, I think they'd lose to Chattanooga. But this is March. Said the great John Rothstein, this is March. And I think Iowa got lucky. They got the best draw possible. They were the hottest team in the country, and they're going to the Final Four. I hate it. I hate it so much, but they're doing it. So in the Final Four, I got Gonzaga versus Kentucky. Both these matchups would be terrific. This Final Four would be amazing. Gonzaga versus Kentucky. I am a huge Gonzaga fan. There's a lot of bias in these picks. Every bracket that I've done, probably since I remember it was Kevin Pangos and Kevin Wiltshire lost to Duke in the Elite Eight, and I believe that was 2016. I think that was the first year I picked Gonzaga to win it all, and I've done it every year since. Obviously, it hasn't paid out for me. But I think Gonzaga is going to be motivated. This whole season was championship or bust. They didn't impress me during the West Coast Conference tournament. There are times this year, midway through the year, there were a few times where I'm like, okay, this is the best team in the country. No way they are losing to anyone. They looked slow, and they didn't look in sync in the West Coast Conference tournament. They had a bunch of question marks. But I think Kentucky at times this year has looked the same way. They're two very comparable teams for their trajectory all year. They both had very high highs and very low lows. Not very low lows. Very high highs, and they've had lows. They weren't very low because they're obviously two of the best teams in the country, but I misspoke there. I think Gonzaga is going to win. I think Mark Few is going to be like, come on, guys. We're going to the championship. He has experience doing it. He's the most – I said Jay Wright's the most successful coach in March over the last decade. Mark Few's number 2. Those are 1A and 1B, two best coaches in the country. Kentucky's guard play is really good and, like, way better than Auburn. But there's been times this year where they kind of are like Wendell Green and KD Johnson from Auburn. Xavier Wheeler and Ty Washington are much better players. Don't get me wrong, but I think their lack of discipline at times, and they keep getting hurt all the time, which is just kind of weird. I think it's going to catch up to them. I don't think Gonzaga is going to have an answer for Chet, or Kentucky's going to have an answer for Chet Holmgren, and I think Gonzaga goes to the championship. Arizona versus Iowa. Arizona's best team in the country. Might have just projected my pick for the championship, but I believe their guard play. I was not going to have, I would assume Keegan Murray would guard Ben Mathurin, but Ben Mathurin's going to hand it to Keegan Murray. Ben Mathurin, one of my favorite players in the country. They're shooting guard / forward, surefire top 10 NBA pick. He might work his way into the top 5 with a deep March Madness run this year. Iowa does not have the length down low. Philip Rebracha is not going to be able to handle Tubelis and Koloko, and I think Arizona's going to run Iowa out of the gym in New Orleans and go to the Final Four in the championship. Gonzaga taking on Mark Few's '1 assistant for all these years, Tommy Lloyd. In his first year at Arizona, he took Omar Ballo with him to Tucson. Nobody else, but just Omar Ballo, the great Omar Ballo. And I think the protege is going to knock off his master. I love Gonzaga, and it would pain me to see this happen. If Gonzaga lost back-to-back national championships 3 times in the past 6 years, it would be horrible to see. The trolls on Twitter would be crazy saying, oh, Gonzaga can't handle, they need to go to a new conference, even though they beat Duke, they beat Kentucky. They need to go to a new conference. The West Coast is Mickey Mouse. I can hear the trolls talking now, and it pains me to say this, but I think Arizona wins. I think they're playing better basketball. Nobody in the country playing better basketball than them. I probably said that 5 times, and I love contradicting myself, and you can bring up the receipts, but I don't care. Arizona's winning. Ben Mathurin, Kirk Risa. I think Kirk Risa is playing in the first round, but Arizona might not need him to play in the first, maybe even the first weekend. Maybe they sit him against Bryant and TCU, and I think they still win both those games. That's how good they are. But based on what he has portrayed as a player, I think he's going to do everything he can to play. He's not going to care what the coaches say, not going to care what the trainers say, and that makes Arizona the best team in the country. Without him, they're a Final Four team. They would have questions, I think, along the way without him against an Illinois and Villanova teams with a lot of good guard play. But I think Ben Mathurin, Kirk Risa, Dalen Terry, Jason Terry's son, I believe, nephew, he is related to Jason Terry. Tubelis, Christian Koloko, best starting 5 in the country, better than Duke because I don't know, whatever. But Arizona's winning. That's my pick. 78 to, 78-76. Ben Mathurin, game-winning 3 at the buzzer. Oh, splash to win it all. Thank you for listening. Actually, let's let this bracket marinate. Some ending thoughts here. I have a lot of upsets, I will admit. I don't like picking chalk. I'm not a boring person. I like having fun. I know a lot about these teams. I fall in love with too many mid-majors every year. I'm like, ooh, I sat and watched 300 hours of college basketball last week. I watched every single championship conference tournament. I was on spring break. I had nothing to do. I like Chattanooga. I like UAB. I like all these teams, all of them. And I picked too many upsets. But this year, it has been chaotic. There has been a lot of upsets. There was a day where I think all 7 of the top 10 lost. Anything can happen in March. I've seen, this is a kind of a common Final Four. Seth Greenberg, I believe, had it, but I like I like my bracket a lot. And this is going to be the perfect bracket. You can bring up the receipts. First ever perfect bracket right here. You're going to win your bracket pool. If you copy this, I'm going to win my bracket pool. I'm the smartest college basketball mind in the world. Come at me, Jay Billis. The only one smarter may be Bill Walton. But that is my bracket. Arizona over Gonzaga. Thank you for listening. Happy March.